Hi, in this video we're going to take a look at our final image and just wrap up the entire course. So really quickly here in Nuke, I'm going to bring the images we just rendered. So if we go to our folder, images, I'm not really going to do any complex comp or anything. I'm just going to add some depth of field and that's it. So I'm going to bring my beauty, my depth, and under source images, you should have the HDR or the link to where to download that HDR. So we're just going to bring that HDR here. There we go. So let's add our Z-depth to our beauty image with a copy node. I'm going to make sure the red goes into the depth. That's good enough. Now let's just add a Z defocus or Z defocus. And let's add the focal point to be somewhere maybe in one of the antennas. We can always switch here to our focal plane setup, increase our depth of field, something like that looks okay. I want it to be a very subtle effect, but to have some depth of field. So this is working okay. Maybe we can change our filter type to be bladed. Okay, and now what we're going to do with the HDR is that right now it's in a panoramic, like in a this format. So we're going to use the circle transform. And I know it comes as a lat long map, and I want the output to be a cube. That's better. We're going to reformat this so it's the same format as our image. We should be down here. There we go, 720p. We can now blur this a tiny bit, maybe more. Oh, not so much. That seems about right, and now we can merge both of them together. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to like complete the image with a little bit of a blur background. That seems to be working okay. So I'm just going to render this. So we have our final JPEG. We can call this, I'm going to put it in the same folder. But I'm going to render this as a JPEG. JPEG, make sure we have the right compression. I'm going to use 444 and the quality to be all the way up. So we can render. Okay, let's come back to our images. So we have our final render. Let me make sure you guys can see the entire thing. So that's it for a final render. I mean, it was just, I just really quickly wanted to add a background and maybe a tiny bit of depth, but this is not going to be a comp tutorial, so I'm not going to go over like all the things that we could do with the different passes, but I just really hope you guys have learned something. We went all over like the different elements of the shader components, how they work, how we can start stacking them up one on top of the other to create more complex and realistic materials. And remember always to build from like the inside to the outside. So scattering and refraction comes first, and then you start adding all your specular layers. Most shaders will have the diffuse part separated from the reflection, but always think of the diffuse as a kind of reflection because it's light that's being bounced out. And now that we've been able to adjust all this, when you think about speculars, you can either work with the already built-in Fresnel curve or you can create your own curves. We have two kinds of materials, dielectric materials that have your typical Fresnel curve that starts very low, and on the last angles it goes all the way to 1. And then we have the conductor materials, which are metals that have a very high curve, and before going up, it usually has like a little bit of going down. And conductor materials will usually give you color highlights, while dielectric materials will give you white highlights. And we went over like all the different elements in the subsurface scattering shader for V-Ray, how we can start layering those on top, working our shaders with both procedural textures or textures that were created in Photoshop, well, and in combination with ZBrush, but then they were heavily modified in Photoshop. So we can always use the same, like we can always take a texture and start using it for many things. We can adjust the remap value so we can control the contrast and have the same texture affect different levels of specular glossiness, bumps, things like that. So with this done, as I always tell you at the end of my course, I'm usually at least once a week on the forum. If you guys ever have any questions, just start a new thread and I'll make sure to like go in and give you my input. I hope you guys have enjoyed it.